Right, everyone, we're just about to start, so if everyone wants to take their seats now, that's great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for coming this evening. My name is Jake Sumner. I'm one of the co-chairs of SERA, and we're very happy to be working tonight's event with Sustainable Link. We've got some great speakers, and I'll just sort of say a little bit about the format. So we're going to hear from 5 different speakers for no more than 2 minutes on some quick punchy points around the topics that we're going to be discussing tonight around the agricultural bill, about farming and food. And then we'll move to a conversation with Martin will be conducting, with Barry, and we'll open up to the floor. And then Barry will have to leave dead on 7, and then we're going to 10-2. It's even shorter. So then, and then we'll hear some comments, some quick comments back from our original speakers. So I'll try and be. I'm going to be super brief. This is our last event of SERA. Thank you everyone for coming to our events. They've been really well attended. It's a really important topic tonight. At SERA, we've worked with lots of the NGOs and the groups, with business, with our MPs. On this area, and we, for example, recently had a round table looking at the implications of the agricultural bill and also for the environment. I'll stop there. I'm going to then start with the seatings, and what we're going to do, as I said, we're going to get these quick fire speeches, and the first person up is Vicky Hurd from Sustain.
It'll be very fast, right, very fast. So Sustain is an alliance of 100 NGOs who have a broad interest in food and farming. So I did want to say something about workers. You've got a briefing on your chair which is calling for a new way of collective bargaining for workers in agriculture. We want to see that in the bill. Barry, I hope you will help us champion that in the bill as an amendment. And also we're working for amendments around supply chain fairness. If farmers aren't treated fairly by the supply chain, they can't treat animals and the land and their workers fairly, and they go under. We need fair rules, and there's a bit in the bill, they need to be better. But I'm actually here to talk about public health, because we think that the agriculture bill and agriculture policy can and should and must contribute to a public health agenda, which is about obesity, it's about cancers caused by poor diets, and poor nutrition and inaccessible fruit and veg. So we're calling on the government to put public health as a public good in the bill, in the agriculture bill, and we're calling on Labour to support us in that and to cover areas like antibiotic use. Over-antibiotic use in farming is meaning that our critically important medical antibiotics are going to be unavailable. It's a crisis. As is obesity. We are producing too much sugar and not producing enough fruit and veg. Let's swap it around. It's not that simple, I'm very aware of that, but we could be diversifying out of sugar into fruit and veg. And I've got a paper that helps you understand that more, Barry. There you go. And a lot of other things about public health. It's only 2 pages, very short. And it talks about the jobs as well, because that is important. We want good employment. And you need to have measures to make sure that's going to work. We haven't got any more time. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. And next we have Richard Hebditch from the National Trust.
Thank you very much. I'll try and keep to my 2 minutes. So we have 2 minutes to be provocative. That's what the briefing said. When I saw this morning, I thought, I've spoken so much about farming in the last year. What is there left to say that is provocative? But then actually I was thinking, I'm not sure that conversation is taking place at the Labour Party. It's taking place obviously with farmers, with farming unions, farming organisations, within the conservation charities, and certainly within the Conservative Party. I think the challenge will be for Labour is, after 40 years where so many decisions are taken in Europe, we haven't had the country to think about farming. And I think also the challenge for Labour coming is without the kind of the mass ranks of rural Labour MPs, how does the party start to have that conversation about what does it mean about the future of farming? I think that's a real challenge. I want to say that as a provocation, to think about how does Labour start thinking about farming for the first time. The agriculture bill second reading is only a few weeks away. There's a real challenge for the party to develop its thinking. But what I'm supposed to be talking about is access and landscape. And I think this is one of the points for us. This is not about stopping farmers from farming, it's about how do we have new opportunities for farmers to develop new models to provide new services to the public, whether that's in terms of the natural environment, but perhaps also in terms of society as well, where actually provide better benefits in terms of educating people about what farming really is. Farmers often tell you that the public are very divorced from actually the reality of farming is their opportunity, and also think about access more generally in terms of kind of the ramblers kind of around access as well, and thinking about the fact that the farmers are the custodians of the landscape. Often those are really important landscapes for people. There's the current review of national parks, and they're always about sending out from the government. Can we start to have a conversation about what is the role of farmers around actually landscape and access to them?
So now we're going to hear from David. Oh, sorry, can you hear now? Oh, sorry. Okay, so David Barnes from from the RSPCA.
Excellent, thank you very much. So, why the RSPCA? So that if you, Barry, if you had an egg for breakfast this morning, chances are it was an RSPCA.
I was up at 6 o'clock doing the media round and they didn't let me go back for breakfast.
Oh. Well, okay. You should have had. So the RSPCA set the standard. The RSPCA set the standards for over 50% of the eggs that are produced in the UK, about 30% of the pork meat that's produced in the UK, and about 20% of the turkey meat that you have at Christmas. So we've got quite a lot of experience about what farmers want, and they're demanding better animal welfare standards. And the question that we've set ourselves is, why should Labour care about the countryside, in particular animal welfare? So I'm sure, Barry, that you get probably many, many letters on animal welfare. Not all of them are generated by me, I promise, but some of them are. Okay? We know that farmers actually want to improve animal welfare, so we've only ever had one animal welfare scheme under a rural development programme in Scotland, and it was oversubscribed. Every of the 49 schemes that are being run in Europe at the moment are oversubscribed, so farmers are demanding it. We know the public are demanding it. So, for instance, of the 44,000 responses to Health and Harmony, over 5,000 were demanding animal welfare specifically. The RSPCA, in a poll last year, found that over 80% of people wanted, as we Brexited, wanted to improve animal welfare standards. So we know the farmers want it, we know the public want it, and we hope that the politicians get that message. Looking at the bill, the RSPCA is delighted that for the first time animal welfare is in there as a public good. However, obviously it's great to support our farmers and to give them money to improve animal welfare standards, but it is useless if we then just export our standards to the USA or to Canada. And that's why there needs to be a relationship between the agriculture bill and the trade bill. And that's why we were delighted when you put your amendments down to the trade bill to say that there needs to be something in there to say you can only import on standards of animal welfare and indeed the environment that are equivalent to the UK. There is no point in exporting our standards to other countries and importing cruelty. Thank you.
So now we have James Cooper from the Woodland Trust.
Thank you. Thanks, Jake. I just wanted to begin with a quick quote. A government that has not only looked at the countryside as a means of producing food, but as part of our great national heritage of beauty. We are now cleaning up the mistakes of the past, and we are throwing open the beauty of the country to all our people. That was Clem Attlee speaking in 1951 in Scarborough, and it still feels incredibly relevant to the challenges we're talking about here. There's a great Labour tradition on the environment, and there's very much an evidence at the Northern Forest Fringe at lunchtime today, hosted by the Woodland Trust, with front benches and Metro mayors pledging their support. But it's felt for a while as though we need to hear the Labour voice on the environment a little more loudly, and the Green Transformation Policy paper published by Sue Headland and their team this weekend is a welcome step in the right direction. All the evidence shows that people need nature, and the environment is the bedrock of our quality of life, but nature's in decline. The natural world is valuable in its own right, and we have a duty to look after it. Some of the statistics that were to the fore during the People's Walk for Wildlife at the weekend and in the State of Nature report make pretty grim reading. Of 218 countries assessed for biodiversity richness, the UK was ranked 189. It's a huge moment for nature, wherever you stand on Brexit. It's said before, it's worth saying again, nobody voted for a poor environment. Nature doesn't respect national boundaries, it doesn't respect political boundaries either. And we know that whatever positive thinking might be taking place in DEFRA, that could be being undermined all the time from elsewhere in government. So we need Labour to champion strong cross-government action on the environment. That means a land use policy that will deliver for nature and have the strongest read across to ambitious environmental legislation. And delivering for nature means taking a long-term view. That means the agriculture bill needs to ensure that there's a mechanism to ensure long-term funding to meet the needs of future policies so that farmers and landowners can have confidence in the new system. We need environmental safeguards, we need ambitious and measurable targets, and really important point list, we need duties, not just powers. Powers alone leave nature at the mercy of changing ministers. So we want to see a duty on ministers to have an environmental land management scheme, not just a power. We want to hear Labour's voice on these issues. Nature needs a race to the top when it comes to environmental leadership. And this autumn is a perfect opportunity for Labour to rediscover the spirit of that quote from Attlee.
That's some great challenges you've heard, and the final one we're going to hear is from Ollie Rodker from the Land Workers Alliance.
So the Land Workers Alliance is a very young union of small farmers, growers, people who are devoted to producing a sustainable agricultural system. So our raison d'etre is slightly different from the NFU's status quo, I would say, and I hope that we can be involved in these discussions because our members are all growing, working on the land, and we feel very, very deeply affected by these policies. And what we want to see is a much more visionary land policy overall. We think there's a lot of gains to be had from a land policy, not just an agricultural policy, that sees opportunities for land, that's in wildlife, that's in public access and the health benefits, as well as the food, as well as things like affordable housing and all the carbon sequestration and energy uses that we're going to have to put through, going to have to put land through. We have to have an overarching vision that's going to need a cross-sectoral, a cross-departmental vision, because it's not just about dividing these things up, because there are so many impacts and effects. In terms of the bill, we welcome, obviously, it's a massive step forward to get away from area-based payments, but as has just been said, it needs duties, not just powers. If none of these things is enforced, then we could end up with nothing. Our fear is that it's an excuse to end up with a dwindling payment system, and what money is going to be there is going to go to the very biggest estates who are going to claim it for their environmental protection and holding on to grassland and doing very little with it. Our members are largely new entrants, people who've come into farming recently, not from farming families. There's a huge amount of innovation and excitement and enthusiasm there, and we have to use that for all of the good benefits that we can have, and that means opening up access to land. It means thinking differently about the way that land is used. We have to have a commitment to food as a public good. If it's going to be a public good to have animal welfare, it must be a public good to have healthy food. That should be in there. And there needs to be a strong commitment to keep the levels of investment into land use and agriculture so that we can see a transition to ecological farming and ecological land use. If there's no commitment to the finances, then, well, as has been said, we're prone to all sorts of avoidance and a slow disintegration of support, which none of us would benefit from. So, number one, let's have a visionary land use policy from the Labour Party. Thank you.
Over to you, Martin.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I'm Martin Sprague, Chief Executive at the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust and Chair-elect of Wildlife and Countryside Link. And I'd like to welcome Barry today. Thank you very much. You've had a really busy day. And I know this is not your current brief. I know that trade is your...
You're dead right.
But you have had a lot of experience with DEFRA and the EFRA committee. In fact, I encountered you on the EFRA committee when I was giving evidence for the rather stupid 7 barrage proposal that was coming up, and you were on that committee at the time. So there we are.
We agreed on that.
We did. I think we did. We did. And I was very pleased about that. I was going to ask actually that, so I'll try and keep it to as near to your brief as possible. But
And don't forget, I'm also Shadow Minister for International Climate Change.
you are.
So we can duck and dive a little bit.
We can indeed, yes. Now, rural issues have not been sort of traditionally what you would associate the Labour agenda with. I mean, why should the environment and farming sort of be sort of matter to the socialist agenda?
Well, actually, I want to disagree with the premise there. That, if you look at the great campaigns in our country, whether you're going back to Kinder Scouts, whether you're talking about the establishment of the National Parks Assembly, it battles who's the rambler at the back that got up and absolutely. You know, if you look at all these movements, they have been social movements that have been, you know, founded within that framework of the Labour Party. And, you know, the first national part, a Labour initiative, and the quote that we just heard from Clem Attwood. And who actually was it that organised in the Second World War, the land girls and so on? So there's a really rich tradition here. And, you know, protecting the Agricultural Workers Board, you know, again appearing back as part of Labour's policy to restore that. So it's not something that I think is you know, foreign to. I know people often think that socialism is about cities. It's not. Socialism is about sustainability. It's about fairness. It's about equality, and it's about doing things in a way that actually makes sense for us to be able to live together. So, you know, I push back against the premise a bit more. And, you know, what I want to see, I mean, the other aspect of this is if you look at it from, you know, my current portfolio, the exports that we have in food and drink from this country are enormous. You know, and they contribute to our balance of payments. And if we don't have a thriving agricultural sector, if we don't have a thriving farming sector in this country, you know, we're not going to have those exports. We're not going to have that value added to food and agricultural products that are produced here. And one of the biggest challenges that I've been constantly, you know, challenges to the government is why the heck is it that you negotiate all these trade agreements and that you don't have any geographical indicators? So, you know, if you're French and you're negotiating a treaty and a trade agreement, you know, in the EU, the French insist that every one of their blinking cheeses, every one of their wines, every one of their, you know, pâté de foies and all the rest of them, all of them are geographical indicators, which means they're protected status. You know, we do, in the latest trade agreement, we had one, Scotch whisky. You know, what about Welsh lamb? What about, you know, I'm Scotsman, so I'm not against that. And if the lady at the bar is listening, you know. This is part of our export market, and it doesn't happen without the solid foundations in good farming practice and good agricultural practice.
Yes, thank you. Well, I mean, with Brexit, we have a current promise that current farming subsidies will stop to 2022, but of course no one knows what's going to happen beyond that. But I mean, we're also got a promise that properly funded farming funding will actually be used for public benefit, and that will certainly help to enhance our environment in this country. But how do we actually ensure that in our trade agreements we're not going to export bad environmental practices by bringing in the wrong goods?
Well, I mean, my speech was made for me on this one because we precisely introduced all those amendments into the trade bill as it was going through the House of Commons. Unfortunately, the government rejected every single one of them. Now, the trade bill has yet to come back into the House of Lords. When it does, I can assure you that this will be part of the strategy that we have in the House of Lords to rejuvenate those amendments and to try and make sure that the Lords pass them so that they come back into the Commons. I mean, it is interesting that, you know, the government has said that they're not going to reduce these standards, but they won't commit to it in legislation. That should be deeply worrying to all of us, and I think, I can't remember who it was that made the remarks about, you know, it's not enough to say it. If you're going to say it, you need to have an enforcement mechanism in place, in statute, to ensure that those standards, those commitments are honored. And at the moment, we don't. And you all saw Liam Fox when he went over to Washington last year, and he was interviewed, you know, that famous interview about chlorinated chicken. And he said, and you know, he gave the top line of the government, and he said, there is no way that we are going to reduce our health and safety standards, our food safety standards, he said. And then the very next breath, he said, but of course, there's no evidence that chlorinated chicken is unsafe to eat. Now, but you see, don't mock, because this is what this government does all the time. They elie the concept, because the truth is that it's not unsafe to eat, because that's why you bathe it in a bath of chlorine, because it gets rid of all the bloody pathogens that were in there, in the first place. What we do in the European Union, we have a different way of doing it. We think that actually it's better to rear animals in an environment so that when they come to slaughter, they're not stuffed full of pathogens in the first place. And they don't need to go now, but this is what this government does. It will lead you to think that it's on your side, but actually, you've got to read the small print. You've got to read the fine print. And we must not, absolutely must not, be doing deals with countries, trade agreements, if we ever get beyond this nightmare of Brexit, if we are able to conclude independent trade agreements with other countries. What we cannot do is agree to align our standards with theirs, with people like the Americans. That is totally undermining the fabric of our society, because, you see, Liam Fox says, oh, well, every trade agreement is simply a decision between, it's a choice between the consumer and the producer. And always, they will come down on the Tory party on the side of the consumer. Cheaper, cheaper, cheaper. To help with the standards, and to help with the fact that when we have these products flooding into our market, undercutting our producers, undercutting our farmers, because they produce it in intensive fashion rather than with decent animal husbandry. Then when it comes into our markets, undercuts our producers, they're out of a job. Now, what benefit is it to know that you'll be able to get lamb for your Sunday dinner, 4p in the pound cheaper? That's no comfort to the hill farmer who's out of a job and hasn't got the money to buy the lamb, and then you've got to think about the impact of the way in which the tariffs are going to impact not just on consumers and producers, but what the knock-on effect is of that. If you look at the tariff on sheep meat, if we have no deal with the European Union, or if we open up our market to New Zealand and Australian lamb coming in, because they don't do it in hill farms. That's why we have herd with sheep, because they survive on hills. They have open plains, right? And they farm these things in helicopters. And if a ewe is giving birth and having trouble giving birth, they don't land the helicopter and help her out. They take out a rifle and shoot her because it's cheaper than landing the helicopter, right? So this is the scale of production that we're talking about. But then what happens? We've got 44% tariff for our sheep meat going over to Europe or to the Middle East. Then what happens? Our farmers go out of business because they can't compete with that Australian and New Zealand land coming in. And it's not just they go out of business, it's the whole management of the uplands that is gone. It's your tourism industry, it's the Lake District, it's the South Downs, it's the Dales, because that's how they are managed as landscapes. And that's why you can't just think of trade as, so it's all about tariffs and quotas and volumes of trade and balance of trade and all the rest of it. It actually affects every single part of our lives. It affects people in food banks, it affects our tourism industry, all of it. And of course, it affects, the supply of labor that comes into the country that we need to be able to produce the food that we do.
Thank you, thanks. Now, we get continually reports of the declining in biodiversity across the whole country. That comes out. State of Nature report is coming out again very, very soon. And it's probably going to show the same things again, steady declines. And it's happening in a very insidious way. It's not, people don't see it. They don't see what's happening out there at all. Now, 70% of the land in this country is farmed. And there's no doubt that modern farming practices have had a lot to contribute to that decline. I'm not pointing fingers at farmers at all, because they're doing a job and they're running a business, and they're running it within the constraints of policies around them. What's Labour Party attitude towards the agricultural bill and public health from the point of view of resilient systems that are going to use less pesticides, less inputs, that are going to have a much declined impact on wildlife and the environment and public health in the long run?
Look, I don't want to stray too much into Sue's territory, and you'll have seen what's come out in the Green Transformation document that Labour's produced this weekend. But one of the key things that I would like to pick up from the comedy slots, I mean, not, you know what I mean? I mean, it was sort of, 2 minutes and you're on at the beginning. And something that's really, really troubled me for a long time is soil management and getting a proper understanding, because it's something that, I'm sure most people in this room are concerned about the state of our soils. But actually, most people in the country, well, I have to say, when I banged on about it with colleagues, they think I'm mad. Yet you're talking 10,000 years to create, and we are wasting it at the rate of knots. Now, you said about the farmers, you don't want to point fingers.
No,
I am
not individual.
Not individually, there I'll agree. But farming practice in this country has washed our heritage, into the rivers and out to eutrofy the estuaries, and we have lost the medium of life. That's what it is. It's the medium of life. And unless we understand that we have to do something to recreate, to enrich our soils, to stop degrading them all the time, and to stop losing them, then actually the problem about how we farm in 60 to 100 years' time isn't going to be there, because there ain't going to be much soil left to farm. And this is such a serious problem, and it's one that just doesn't get taken seriously enough by policymakers. So one of the first things that I would like to see, all this money that if we do ever leave the European Union is going to get, relocated and put in. The first thing we need to focus on is how we improve our soil structure and how we stop our soil loss and soil degradation. And of course, the same for our water courses as well. These are the essential ingredients of farming and food production, and they're the essential ingredients of our landscape. And there's all sorts of ways that we need to do that, and forestry, of course, is one of them. But it's absolutely at the core of how we should be approaching agricultural production.
Are we likely to get Labour policies sort of actually highlighting these things?
I am not being violent, and I'm not going to get in trouble for mistake. Well, I mean, I can read you out, what Labour's vision for farming 2030, 2050 is, but you've all got it.
Yes.
So there's no point in my doing that. You've got me here because you want my views, not because you want me to parrot what is in the document. But I really don't want to start straying into the landscape of setting policy.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Now, I know you've only got a very short time because you've got to get away in something like 10 minutes.
10 minutes, yeah.
Are you happy to have any questions?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Audience at all?
Sure.
Has anyone got any questions for me? The lady there first, I think, and then yourself, so.
Now, Mike, Hi, I'm Abby Kay from Farmers Guardian. I just wondered what your views would be on having a multi-annual budget for agriculture that's separate to the ordinary parliamentary cycle, because it's a long-term, you know, farmers do things on a long-term basis and they don't want to be worrying every time there's a budget thinking we're going to have money taken away from us.
And you're a journalist.
Yeah.
And I've just said that I'm not going to commit policy.
No, I was asking for your personal views on it.
So let me not answer your question by talking to you about things that are important. Okay? If you're in the business of land management, it's important that you have clear sight of how you're going to manage that land into the future and your plan for it, how to improve it, how to utilize it, and how you're going to conduct your business, because you are a land manager or a farmer and you need certainty, as every business does, about the regime under which you're going to do that. Okay? So I have not said that I agree. I have not said that I agree with the proposal. You see, I knew there was a proposal. I have not said that I agree with the proposal for 5-year budget separate from the Treasury framework. What I've said is I am sure that a Labour Secretary of State for DEFRA will understand the importance of a long-term sustainable outlook for farm managers. Okay?
I've been around a long time, believe it or not, and I've been coming to conference for over 20 years. One of the concerns I have is why I turned up here today, because I don't think the landscape and the rural thing, agriculture, is actually on the agenda, or doesn't seem to be on anything. I know where the focus is, and I agree. I mean, I was in there, and I agree with everything in those conferences. There was no, I've been going for years, Can I just say I'm actually a SERA member, but a sleeping member, not very active. But that was my concern, is that Labour needs to put this on the agenda. There is a thing called the grey vote. They are the people who vote. I know some students did because of the student fees and things like that last time, but normally it's the grey vote that votes. And a lot of the grey vote are the people like myself who love the countryside. They love that sort of thing, and that's what we should be aiming for, to get the grey vote. Now, one of the things, I'm not a rambler. Well, I'm a rambler, but not a member of the Ramblers, okay? And I feel strongly, I've written articles on this as well, but myself. But, if we would have the right to roam, which Gove is sort of implying, or sort of talking about as one of the goods and things, I'm sure if Labour put that on the agenda, that would be a good, it would actually bring in quite a lot of votes. Can I just quickly go back to what you said about the history? When Labour first got into office in '97, there were people like Michael Meacher, who was the Secretary of State. He was also a SERA member as well. His legacy was the South Downs National Park, because I live in Reigate, but Brighton is my hometown. And that's his legacy. And, a lot of those politicians then were older, whereas now we've got a lot of younger ones who've been in the Westminster bubble and know nothing but politics. And I wonder, is this new breed of politician that is why it's not really on the agenda. It's a value to us, as older people. I remember carpets are butterflies. Now you go around and, oh, there's butterflies. Oh, there's another one over there. Sorry for taking up my time, but think about right to roam, because I think that could be a winner for the Grey Vote.
Can I just respond to that, first of all, by saying, when you say we need to do this because it'll get us votes. No, we don't. We need to do it because it's the right thing to do.
Oh yeah, I agree with that.
And we...
But the trouble is, politicians want votes and they want to get in.
Well, we do want to get in, but we want to get in to do something. That's the point. Look, yes.
there's going to be huge pressure to compromise, and in many cases, the areas where the other party will want to compromise is on agriculture. Are you giving a cast iron commitment now that you will not allow goods into the UK that do not meet the standards that we set for our own producers?
Gosh, 2 questions in a row that I can answer yes. Yes, I am. And I'm not just giving you that cast iron guarantee, generally is giving that cast iron guarantee. Okay? Because we are absolutely clear. Yes, of course, there is a value in doing trade agreements, but as you rightly said, the trouble with trade agreements is that they're about liberalization. They're about what you're prepared to give in exchange for what somebody else is prepared to give you. How much access they want to your market in return for the access they're giving you to theirs. And very often, you're absolutely right. You know, the headline things, the things that, because the UK, and if you, sorry, you're absolutely right, that 80%, right, 80% of our GDP is actually in services. So always that's at the fore when we're thinking of mixed agreements, service agreements and goods agreements, right? And that's why we have really laid this down clearly, that we do not envisage any situation where we are going to reduce our health, our sanitary, our phytosanitary standards, our food standards, and open them up to the sort of markets that would want to come in and lower those standards. Now, if they meet the standards, fine. If they don't meet the standards, no. And that's why we've been firm on, everything from hormone beef to, to carcinogenic pork to all the rest of it. Because that is not the sort of society that Labour wants to see. It really isn't. We need to be thinking about the sustainability of our society into the future, and that means sustainable farming. Of course, we don't, and we don't produce all the food that we need in this country here, and much of it we do have to import, and of course much of it we import to add value to in this country in our food and drinks industry, and that's great. But what we're not prepared to do is sacrifice the animal welfare standards or the food safety standards that we've established.
Two very quick questions. I think we've only got time for 2 now. It's this lady here, that's the gentleman there.
Just wanted to follow on that, Patty Brown from Bailey Milk Action, and we've been at Codex for 20 years, we've followed Codex. And just at the last meeting of the CAC, which was in Rome in June, the US was absolutely adamant that Codex should allow routine antibiotics to all the animals, and that the customers of Codex are the multinationals. And it was just extraordinary. And if Labour come in, you've got to get involved in that, or say costs on your houses to Codex, but keep the conflicts of interest out of it. That's what we concentrate on.
Can I just, and it is a follow-on, absolutely, it's really closely aligned. And what I want to say is this: why do people in China or India or places in the Far East buy our products? Is it because they're cheaper? No. It's because they believe they're of higher quality and higher standards. And that's the market that we've got to cultivate. When we're trading with other countries, what I want is for people to say, oh, I want British, right? And I want British because it's the best, it's been reared in the most sustainable way, it's been reared with proper animal husbandry and animal welfare standards, and I know that it's not stuffed full of toxins, right? And that's the image that we have got and need to protect. And unfortunately, if you read the Cato Institute report that came out last week, okay, which is the right-wing think tank about free trade, and you listen to what Liz Truss was saying in New York last week, joining it up, because she was talking about this. She said in New York that the great thing about President Trump was that he got rid of all this clunky regulation. Clunky regulation. And she said, it's been marvellous because it's opened up your country for fracking. Right? I'm not making this up. I'm really not. This is what she said. And then she went on to say, and look at what happens in a place like China, where there isn't any of this clunky regulation. She said, you know, it's amazing what they managed to get done in China. They do things on Chinatown. Chinatown, she said. She said, they build all this infrastructure, they just do it, they say they're going to do it, and they do it in Chinatown. And what we need in the UK is Chinatown. She didn't bother to tell me that 38,000 workers died on construction sites in China last year because there are no clunky health and safety regulations. You know, that was a good year. 3 years ago, 66,000 workers died on construction sites in China because there were no clunky regulations. So you can see exactly where the right wing of the Conservative Party want to take not just the agricultural industry, not just the food and drinks industry, but everything. And they want a no-deal Brexit in order to deliver it. And that's why we've got to stop it.
There's a lot to like in agriculture, though, for reading it. There's a few things which give you some disquiet, right? One of them is with the transition stage, which is proposed, it's a 7-year transition stage for basic payments.
Yeah.
We're going to 2021. And now, one of the proposals is that it be de-linked from the land, the basic payments, but also that the money can actually be sort of taken as a lump sum. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I look upon this as being essentially, it's a support, it's like any other welfare benefit. So why should it be treated in exactly the same way? Rather than, why should the farming sector be treated in a way that's... At a time when you've got... I'm a Tory, perfectly frankly. But at a time when you've got...
God bless you for coming.
At a time when you've got pension taxes and some iniquities like that, why should this sector have so much... I don't think I want to upset people, I think I want to keep people on board, but it's a step too far. And it's the big land managers, the big landowners who benefit.
It's the RSGB, isn't it?
But this is in terms of actually getting cash for doing that. You know, why should the Duke of Buccleuch turn up every fortnight and sign on and say, well, what are you doing? And they'll be asking you questions. What are you doing? They falsify your business the next fortnight.
Can I stop you? I'd love to have a chat with you sometime, particularly if it was over one of our beverage products that has actually got,
yes,
secure status. But it's an area that is not my brief, and therefore I shouldn't pronounce it. Okay, forgive me.
Yes.
But I see exactly where you're coming from, which is to question why the support for agriculture should come in return for not doing stuff. Now, my understanding is that what we're proposing, or what we're seeing proposed, is that it should only come in return for environmental benefits. That, I think, is the right transition to make.
I agree.
Absolutely the right transition to make. But I would also say to you that there's another principle, which is not just public support for public benefit. There's another principle that I don't see much employed, and that is the polluter pays. And I think we have to establish what the standards are, and when they are contravened, the polluter has to pay for the remediation of them. Sorry, I really do have to go.
You do.
It's great being with you. And can I just, Jake, can I just thank you and SERA for all the work that you do all around the year, but particularly bringing people together at Party Conference, enabling us to have these sorts of discussions.
Thank you very much.
everyone. We've got another 15 minutes, 20 minutes, so I wonder if I could ask our speakers to come back up to the top here and maybe give just a brief reaction to any of the things or points you'd like to make concerning the subjects that have been discussed so far. Should we start just going down the line, shall we? Yes.
Can I just come back to Abby's question, which was about long-term funding for farming, and I think that's a really important point. And so one of the things that strikes me is the way that government and society treats certain kinds of infrastructure. So roads infrastructure, rail infrastructure, there is a multi-annual settlement for that. They assess what the need is for that infrastructure. It's informed by good evidence, and then the government says, this is how much money we have over a 5-year period.
To actually meet that need. So I think it's a really good question. I think it's really important to actually treat green infrastructure, which is so vital for ultimately for the whole economy, in the same way that we treat grey infrastructure as well. So I think it's a really important point, and I think it really gets across the point actually that for conservation charities, for NGOs and farmers, we're both concerned with actually how much money is there to deliver this. We both want the money to be going to farmers. We want them to be delivering good public goods. We want them to be delivering profitable industry. So I think it's really important to actually have that certainty going forward in terms of the funding.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. Good initial response on what we can worry about. Reclaiming the issue as not being a town versus country thing. We all want to see a thriving farming sector carrying out good stewardship, and the fact that people in towns or the countryside, these issues matter to them. Really, sometimes the posse conferences, whichever one you're asked, it can feel like a little bit of a bubble, and when we think about the kind of the wider public out there, I think that's an incredibly important point. Really, this isn't a town versus country issue. What I also took very strongly there was the kind of the need to convert warm words into action, which is why this is such an important period we're entering this autumn with the agriculture bill and the move towards an environment bill. We're in a precarious position for nature, as I said, and these next few months are crucial. And the point that was made about soils, acting on the State of Nature report, moving towards the greater stimulation of things like agroforestry. Really great to hear Paul Brannan speaking so warmly about agroforestry this afternoon in the Conforth range earlier on.
Well, I think it was great to have the cast iron guarantee from him and Jeremy on standards. I hope it covers all the standards that we're particularly interested in, all the way labour, animal welfare, food safety and quality, and all those. So that was good to hear. I agree with everything Richard and James were saying there. And particularly about the issue of labour supporting a collective bargaining. Well, we know they do support it, but we want to see actual action, so we want as many MPs as possible, so we want to have that support, and that goes for all these areas. The proof's in the pudding. If Labour does actually talk about farming, talk about food in public, and gives its membership and its supporters a clear steer and clear messages to give out when they're talking to people in the street and knocking on doors about food and farming and high quality standards and high nature value farming, etc., etc. So we want to see that happen. We get some very good words from Labour, but we want to actually see it on the ground.
So we've got two cast iron guarantees now. We've got the Shadow Secretary of State for Trade saying that he would definitely not allow in imports produced to poorer animal welfare standards. And don't forget, Michael Gove at EFRA in December also gave the same cast iron guarantee. However, we don't have anything written on paper, and this is my worry. Why did the government reject that amendment that Barry put down at committee stage on the trade bill? And will they accept such an amendment on the agriculture bill? Because I'm very concerned. If we go to no deal and go to WTO rules, everyone talks about WTO rules as being easy. They are not easy. Essentially what it means is you get tariffs, and you can't export your food to the EU because of the high tariffs, and you've got to import your food from somewhere else. And that worries me, because everywhere else has poorer animal welfare standards than the UK. So we need that cast iron guarantee written into paper.
Just come back to the wider issue of the payments, which was mentioned at the end. I mean, there's a reason why payments have been direct payments have been very unpopular, because a lot of the money has been going to the wrong people. It's been going to the biggest businesses and the richest people. And a measure of a new policy is going to be whether it starts going to the right people. And the right people, in my book, are the new entrants who want to bring the innovation and sustainability into farming, the people who are doing best practice, and the people who are demonstrating how to make a transition from agriculture that is causing the damages that Barry talked about, soil damage, other wildlife losses and biodiversity losses, to a much more holistic and intelligent farming system. That knowledge is out there, and the money that's coming has to support it. And if the money is going to be limited, then I think there's going to have to be a use of a cap, so that the biggest amounts, so that it's not just proportional to the amount of area or the amount of trees, the amount of grass, and it's going to have to be spread out to cover everybody. That's going to mean capping off the biggest payments, so it can be spread out. There's going to be a special case for charities and organisations with public benefit. That's the discussion. But the people with the biggest amount of land cannot be the people who get the biggest amount of money.
Thank you, all of you. I'd like to make a comment as well in that I think probably it's fair to say that Michael Gove has surprised us all, anyone to do with the environment, in what he's been saying and what he's been actually pushing over the last few years. But it's all going to be about the delivery, and he won't be there for forever, as we all know, and that's one thing that worries me. But in answer to the question about the payments to farmers, my own example is where I live locally in Oxfordshire, and the local farmer there, I know him very well and everything, he's an extremely efficient food producer, but actually it's a wildlife-free zone, and it's certainly a public-free zone. So that's the kind of guy that if this is delivered, where you have to you only accept money for public benefit, he's going to have to sharpen up his act pretty quickly. Now, he's not a huge farmer, but some of those big landowners could contribute enormously to changing the whole face of the countryside and the interaction with people in the countryside if this is delivered. I would say one challenge for Labour is to make damn sure that the Tories do deliver the policies that Gove is laying down at the moment. I think that's absolutely the case. So I wonder, we've got a little bit of time, whether you want to at least get a debate going or a discussion going. Any questions you've got for any of us here? Yes, sir.
The new policies coming out of Cranston are very good for someone like me, an old environmentalist. But I live in the country, and farmers are not our enemies. They are the people who manage the land for us. But unfortunately, I live in North Devon, beautiful green North Devon. Every now and again, it turns blue. Because every farmer in North Devon who doesn't support the Conservative Party is a UKIP member. So we somehow, on the left, have to persuade farmers that we are not their enemy. And in fact, we can do things for them to make their lives better and our food production better. And that's one of the things I want to hear from the Labour Party now. How we win over the farmers.
Does anyone
Well, I'll just start and say that the first thing to do is to go and talk to them and to actually get engaged. And I think there is a disconnect. Although Barry was right to talk about the historical roots of the Labour Party, and the first you need to know what agricultural labourers from Tolpuddle, but I think there has been a serious lack of connecting the urban and the rural, and a serious lack of dealing with countryside and farming issues in the Labour Party, and I really hope that some of the things we've heard in the last couple of days are a sign that that's changing. But we can't make progress unless that conversation happens, and it's got to happen with a clear agenda of the changes that are needed, so that people know where they are, because farmers want to produce food and they want to help their communities, and nothing that the Labour Party should be proposing or any of the rest of us should challenge those two things.
Yeah, I think what both nature and farmers and land managers need is some security and certainty and clarity. So what I'd like to see is the Labour Party focusing on how we can improve the agriculture bill, which is a pretty good piece of legislation, but how we can improve it to make it even better and give that clarity and security.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's actually a crucial bill. With 70% of our land actually managed by the farming community, we need the food, we need the land managed properly. We've got to work much more closely with them, and I would expect the political parties to actually be much more engaged. You don't hear a lot said about it at all, and I think this is something that we've really got to address. So you wanted to ask a question?
Is there a microphone?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Jonathan Meek, I'm the Environment Editor from St Times. I haven't read it in enough detail to be 100% sure of this, but I'm reasonably sure of that. And that the new agriculture bill... Is that better? Yeah. The new agriculture bill will give basically bonanza to landowners who don't actually do that much, but maybe who allow things like shooting and such activities. And yesterday I went to the Basque fringe meeting, and they were delighted. They were saying this is going to make our lives so much easier. They basically think landowners will get money for keeping land for shooting. It'll be a bonus to shooting and other blood sports. And I wondered really whether, I'm pretty sure that's what Gove would have intended. I wonder what it's all of us would have intended and what reactions. Whether that's a good thing. Maybe it does preserve land for wildlife in some ways. Maybe it's a bad thing because some types of shooting tend to wipe out a whole raft of so-called vermin.
Did you want to...
I mean, you're talking about the de-linked payments that are just going to be a big handout, potentially a lump sum right at the beginning of the period from 2022. And I think there is a really big public acceptance issue with those payments, which I don't think is certainly not over yet. There's potentially farmers will be able to get what they would expect to get over 7 years as a lump sum, will get it annually. And I think we would argue that there should definitely be standards attached to that link it to public goods and outcomes, and certainly, obviously, baseline regulations and compliance on all different aspects of farm production. And that would go for game, land under game or other forms of production. I don't have a particularly line about the game, so other people probably do, but I think I understand that was Gove's a policy, and I just don't think it's going to get public acceptance. It's a huge. I mean, can you imagine how much money Dyson will get if he decides to take it like that? It's extraordinary, and I think there could be something done much better with that money.
So the agriculture bill is very clear as to the first clause 1 is essentially lays out what the public goods are, and they are environment, animal welfare, and 4 or 5 other different things. What the agriculture bill doesn't do at the moment is say that all the money will go to the is that we need clarity in that having clearly set out what are public goods, you now need to clearly set out that the money goes to those public goods, because come 2027, for my reasoning, if a farmer does those things and delivers certain things on the environment, on animal welfare, they should be paid, and if they don't, they shouldn't.
I think it's pretty worrying, the language around the de-linking of payments. I think if money goes to people who are going to be doing absolutely nothing other than sitting on the land they've already got, then that is an outrage, and it shouldn't be in there. We would like to see much more clarity about what that's going to mean, and I understand that some of the thinking was around encouraging older farmers to get a payment so they would feel able to free up their land and let other things happen on it. And that's a good principle, because there is a bottleneck around land ownership and land use, but there's got to be a regulation or some kind of clarity that that's actually going to happen. If someone's going to get a lump sum at the beginning, then there's got to be a clear outcome that's beneficial.
And ditto for diversification.
Yes. Gentleman there, and then you.
Yeah, or I can speak loud.
My name's Paul Turner. I'm from Wells CLP down in Somerset, and I am the Rural Affairs Officer on my executive, which means that I deal with farming issues and agri-food issues for my CLP. And I've yet to meet another Rural Affairs Officer for a rural CLP. The panel is giving the impression that the agriculture bill supports farming with public goods. Now, my reading of the agriculture bill is quite different. You've got the section 1, which is the most important section, dealing with financial assistance. It's divided into 2 halves, and the first half deals with the public goods. And that can be claimed by anyone who owns or buys land, perhaps after Brexit when land prices have gone down. And shamefully, for an agriculture bill, it's only in the second part of that section that talks about financial assistance for agricultural activities. Now, I think that we should be saying that, as the panel wants, that we should change round those priorities so that this agriculture bill gives financial assistance for agriculture, provided that it produces these public goods. By all means, we're going to have an environment bill later with its own funding, and that can deal with public goods by people who own land, landkeeping in a good environmental way. But let's make this an agriculture bill which actually supports farming, and supports farming which actually does the environmental goods as well.
Just a quick question for me around rewilding. It's something I hear about a lot, and it seems like a really good thing to encourage where possible. So Barry Gardiner talked about the national parks not having lambs on them anymore. That could be rewilding. I just want to know the clever people on the panel's opinion around that.
Can I say something first? I mean, it's that balance between landscape as we know it and want it, and maybe as it could be. I think the rewilding thing comes up a lot, actually, and I know many people involved in it. I think there is the ability in this country, with the way that population is distributed, for us to be able to have certain areas and certain places where we can just allow things to go in a different direction. There are other places where I think even public acceptability wouldn't necessarily allow that, but you can still have environmental measures in there. So I think it is about a balance, but I wonder whether any colleagues want to say.
Just quickly, I think there is a place for some rewilding in some areas, but if people are familiar with a land sharing or a land sparing or a land sharing outlook, there's a chronic loss of wildlife because of the way we're doing farming. If we change the way that we're doing farming, we don't need so much land to be given over to rewilding. So I would say let's share out land properly. That means let's have an agriculture system that is beneficial to wildlife, which is totally possible, and then we get the best of both worlds.
Just a general point about the question about funding. So I guess it's always the issue about kind of hanging around waiting for a bill that might or might not happen. It seems to sense to make use of the chances you get with legislation, and I think it's important. The key thing is who can best deliver those public goods if that's what you're trying to achieve. I also think that the bill is only one aspect of it. It's really a bill that's about enabling payments to be made. Wider kind of food and farming policy is also needed, but I think the bill is just a bill. What else we need to see from governments is kind of the wider part of it in terms of things like a kind of food strategy that's promised as well. That's what we need to help ensure that farming remains profitable, becomes profitable, and is a world-leading industry as well. But I think this also provides really strong opportunity to put environmental land management at the heart of farming policy, and also think about how we bring in new entrants to farming as well. So the earlier questions around the dealing payments, and there are a lot of obstacles to farmers leaving farming. Older farmers, the lack of affordable housing in rural areas, that's one of the issues, and I think that's one of the things that this bill is trying to achieve without dealing to payments.
Yeah, I'm going to sort of agree with a lot of what's been said there. Yes, in terms of bringing new entrants into farming, and also those who don't want to leave farming, ensure that they have the advice that they need to make transitions to a new system that rewards. It's not an either-or here, really. We can have sustainable food production and a rental land management that enhances the environment. And on rewilding, I agree with Martin, it's more appropriate in some places than others, and we've got to be a lot smarter about where we target activities.
Just one thing we haven't talked about in the bill, which is relevant, which is about making the market pay and play fair, make sure that farmers get a better deal from the marketplace. And the fair dealing section of the bill, which we weren't really expecting to be as good as it is, it's not good enough, but we should be supporting that.
But over and above all that, and the way in which payments might be designed in the future, is the issue which you talked about in your initial comedy slot, as it was called, is the issue of duties. You know, none of this needs to happen. As you pointed out, the first bit of the bill doesn't actually mention the environment, and so we've got to really be fighting hard. Labour should be fighting hard, and I agree with what you said. Gentlemen from the Labour Party should be going out into the streets and talking to people about this. That we need duties, and we need targets, and we need a budget. You know, otherwise the bill isn't really good enough. There's a lot of good stuff in it, and we could talk about the detail. But if it's not duties, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have to happen, a lot of it. So there's a big worry there.
Can I just quickly finish before I just hand it over to Jake, just to say an example of what is now and what could be, which I think answers the rewilding thing as well, is where I live in Oxfordshire. I'm at the base of the Downs, and there are drove roads coming down. It was absolute sheep grazing land in the past, and I know from 100 years ago that the wildflowers, the butterflies, the orchids were very rich there. It is now totally arable on thin chalk soils. The fertilisers are going down into the chalk aquifer and are causing pollution problems. It's a wildlife-free zone. You could turn that around without rewilding just by changing the whole agricultural system. What we need is a national strategy for agriculture. That's what we need.
Thank you, and I think that draws the conclusion of this event, and thank you for all of you that have come and listened to this, and we've heard a great range of speakers and thoughts and ideas to take forward. And if everyone can just applaud our speakers, that'd be great. Thank you. And I just want to say this is our final event of the SERA series at Labour Conference. We'll be doing more events throughout the year. If you haven't become a SERA member, please join, and also follow us on social media. And we'll be doing more events. If you want to work with us, also please contact us, because that enables us to do more work. And I think one of the themes that we've seen from this conference is the joining up across the Labour front benches for really ambitious response to climate change, to green policies, to sustainable growth. And both, I was in some sessions earlier today, it's really great that we've got a very ambitious vision and programme. It needs to be a Labour government to put it into action, but already that's shaping the public discourse, and I think that's where we're going to go ahead. And I think it's great working with organisations on how we can achieve this ahead. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.